Am I the arsehole for moving into my ex's dream house with my pregnant fiancée when it's making our kids not want to live with her anymore? When my wife and I were still married, we got plans made up with an architect to build our dream house for us and our 2 kids on this nice piece of land I owned. But during the construction our relationship deteriorated very quickly. Within the year we got divorced and I got to keep the unfinished house. My plan was to try and sell the house as is because I was drained and didn't have the money or energy to deal with construction anymore. So the house basically just sat there unfinished for 3 years because no one wanted to buy an unfinished house. I'm now engaged and my fiancée is pregnant, so we had to move up our plans to get settled in a house. Unfortunately, after looking in our area we couldn't find anything that would meet our needs. I brought up the unfinished house I had. It had more than enough room for all of us as it had 4 bedrooms and 2 offices. I did make sure to explain to my fiancée that my ex was the one that had done most of the planning for it with the architect in case that made her uncomfortable. She didn't mind at all though because it was way better than the other options we had. So I got in contact with a new contractor who went out and inspected the house and he said it was solid to continue work on. A lot had already been done so we got quoted with 2 months for them to finish it, which would give us plenty of time to get settled in before the baby arrives. There were a few setbacks, but the house got finished a few weeks later than expected. It's been a couple weeks since then and we have it all set up just right. The nursery is perfect for our baby and my 2 older kids love their new rooms. Before I only had a 2-bedroom apartment so they had to share a bedroom. They have to add their moms too, but their bedroom is much bigger there. The one at my old apartment was pretty cramped so they didn't like staying over at my place much. Now that they've got bigger rooms all to themselves they're really happy here. The problem is they've asked if they can stay here the majority of the time now instead of their moms. Me and my fiancée don't have a problem with this, but my ex does. We were discussing it when she broke down and started yelling crying saying I was insensitive to move in there in the first place because it was supposed to be a home for our family and now we're going to all be living there as a family with someone else when she did everything to make it perfect. She said it's like I'm basically taking her kids away and replacing her as their mom. I wouldn't say we're replacing her, but the kids do like my fiancée a lot, so I think it's causing some jealousy issue. I think since they are teenagers now I feel like they should have more privacy and some say in where they live. Edit. Going to have a talk with everyone and try to convince them all to a 50/50 split. Nah, I get why your ex is upset. She designed the house and probably feels very emotionally attached to it. And now you're living in it with the new woman and even her kids don't want to leave. But you didn't do anything wrong either. This was the best option for your new family who you need to consider first and foremost. I would talk to the kids. Yes, extra space is nice but they're also old enough to understand why they're not wanting to stay with their mom would be hurtful. Just wait until the baby arrives and see if the teenagers will still want to stay there most of the time. Could be that they don't enjoy it that much anymore. Nah, your plans changed with your ex. No one's at fault for that. You still own the land, still own the house you're building. She has a house, you have a house. She might be feeling deserted, though. First the divorce and now the kids want to leave her too? That would be pretty depressing. Info. You mentioned in another comment that you're the stepfather of the 2 teen boys. Are they her biological children? Or did I misunderstand? Actually it's 1 teen girl and 1 teen boy. My ex already had them from a previous relationship. Then we got married, so I was their stepdad. A year or so into the marriage I adopted them, so now I'm just their dad. But no, they're not biologically related to me. This is important info, and makes me more sympathetic to your ex. You are not an asshole, but I really feel for her even more. This took the words right out of my mouth. It's not your responsibility to reassure your ex she's not being replaced, but a little kindness goes a long way. She's mourning the loss of the future she thought she'd have. Maybe have a family talk with her and your kids and also explain to your kids how their actions may be perceived. It is his job, actually. Despite the divorce, he chose to have 2 lives with her and share the responsibility of them. He loved her once, and as the mother of his children, she deserves the respect. He needs to make it very clear that she cannot be replaced and tell the kids that too. When raising kids with your ex, you need to make sure parenting partner recognizes they're valued. Ignoring her and not telling her she's not being replaced very clearly doesn't show he values her as a parent and alienates them more from each other, making it harder in the long run. Not to mention the divorce was several years ago. The OP mentions that the house sat unfinished for 3 years. My ex-husband and I split up 4 years ago and I got primary custody, with the children, now aged 16 and 14, spending a day with him once a week, never overnight. Both he and I have new partners now and we get on okay. I would still be gutted if one or both of my kids said they wanted to live with their dad for any reason. No amount of time makes that not hurt. Now imagine how you'd feel if you only saw your kids once a week and never overnight. I'm sure OP would feel like scum if his kids didn't want to see him more than once a week. Nah, but I honestly do feel terrible for your ex. I can't even think about how much it would crush me to design the home of my dreams for my family and then watch that family live there with another woman. Especially if my kids then decided they loved the house so much they didn't want to stay with me as often anymore. I'm sure she feels like she's watching a lot of her life slip away from her and I think it's important to be sensitive to that. You're not safe for living there, though. I personally wouldn't want to live in a house I designed with my ex, but you aren't ours either way. I do think it's important to make sure your kids don't skip out on spending time with their mom just because they have a big house to hang out in now. Oof. I think honestly nah, but man, I feel for your ex. You know that old country song that goes at my house and that's my wife. Who's that man living my life? Well, that's pretty much your ex-wife's situation now. To see you all happily living in the house she designed would be a gut punch, no matter how mature you are. At the same time, there were obvious practical reasons for you to do what you did. Encourage your kids to spend equal time at your ex's house. Love the song comparison. I was so torn because I know it would hurt badly for the ex even though technically OP isn't being malicious. I was no asshole through most of this. Finishing the house makes sense as a best option. Your ex being upset also makes sense, but I wouldn't say we're replacing her. But she's clearly jealous is just really an asshole thing to say. I don't know what her life is like now, but yours sounds pretty great, and you're living in a house she invested a lot of time into. And now her kids want to live there the majority of time too. And you're implying she's being petty. You are the asshole. It is petty. They tried to sell it. No dice. They should just keep this property unused because his ex did a lot of the work in planning it. That's not how it works. And it's sat empty for 3 years. Her getting pissed that it's being used now and not by her is petty. She is jealous and having feelings is fine. Yelling and crying at her ex just because life didn't go the way she planned is absolutely an R move. IDK. OP isn't A, but I see what top comment is saying about implying the ex is being petty. Like, having your children choose to stay with your spouse over you doesn't really seem like a trivial hurt to me. Also, people don't always react in perfectly reasonable ways in real life. Like ideally she wouldn't have yelled and cried, but I don't really blame her for doing so. I would feel bad in her situation. What the wife feels is really normal now. She's sad her kids don't want to live with her and the house situation. Being more understanding of the difficult position the wife is in would be the mature thing to do. No one is asking OP not to do what he's doing. We're asking for him to let her cry about it without getting mad at her. If the genders were reversed and he started crying about it all, then the same thing would be true. The whole situation is emotional and sad for the person and the wife's position. Empathy is a good thing. I feel like you're NTA, but I definitely can see why your wife feels like that. Although since you got the unfinished house when you split up, your ex must have known that eventually you'd finish it and move in. Well, she knew my original plan was to sell it. Then she assumed we finished construction so we could sell it as it wasn't selling unfinished. Info. Why did your ex not end up with the house in the divorce? If it is her dream house, how were your marital assets split? You said you settled out of court. So is it possible that she feels she got less of your combined assets in the interest of promoting peace for the kids and or expediting the divorce? Because I owned the land before the marriage and I paid for the majority of the construction from savings I had before we were married. We split up our combined savings, with her getting more to account for the money she contributed towards the house. It sounds like, since you owned the land prior to marriage, she never really had the option to end up with the house. This seems like an issue built on a lot of smaller issues that have finally gotten to her. Nah, did you have to use her plans exactly? Or could you have modified them? If you could have modified, why didn't you? Nah, but you don't seem to have much sympathy for your ex, saying it's causing some jealousy issue. Imagine putting in all that work to design the perfect house for your family only to end up divorced and your ex moving into said perfect house with his fiancée. Oh, and your kids not wanting to spend as much time with you. What a punch to the gut. Your ex did all that work and got jack squat. The custody agreement should have been set in place years ago. 50/50. If it was such a perfect house, she could have fought for it instead of giving it up to be sold and finished. Now that all the actual work is done, suddenly she gets emotional. Jealousy, nothing more. He owned the land prior to their marriage, so he might have gotten it anyway. But they did mediation instead of going to court, so who knows how fairly the assets ended up being split. She might not have pushed for getting the house during mediation because it was his land and a lot of his premarital savings went into building it. And yeah, it probably is jealousy, lol. But I think it's very understandable jealousy that she just needs some time to work through. And of course she wouldn't get emotional over it before his family actually moved in. Nobody was living in the house before, so it didn't evoke the same visceral reaction of feeling replaced, I suspect. Your ex did all that work and got jack squat. What work? All she did was help design it. She also got half the joint savings. The land and money that paid for it all was his prior to the marriage. If she wanted the house or proceeds from selling it, she should have paid half for the land and construction. You're not entitled to half of something you didn't pay for. I did make sure to explain to my fiancé that my ex was the one that had done most of the planning for it with the architect. Right in the post, OP said she did the work planning and designing it with the architect. Where the hell did I say she was entitled to anything? I'm saying OP should have so damn sympathy and not write this off as jealousy. Yes, you're kind of the arsehole here. It's understandable, but try to see it from her perspective. She lost a lot, and you've now sort of replaced her and taken her dream life. It may not be completely rational, but I can't imagine how hard that would be for someone. Strictly speaking, you have replaced her. I don't think you have been malicious or anything, but watching another woman living the life your ex-wife had hoped to spend with you in the house you planned together is bound to trigger her feelings of loss and possibly failure. To have the children you share express a desire to abandon her for a higher standard of living, also one that she wanted to share with you and them, would have to be very painful. Exactly. I don't think the ex-wife is jealous. I think she is hurt. What was he supposed to do that would make him not call her jealous and be at least slightly sympathetic? I am in a somewhat similar but opposite position. My wife and I are divorcing after 20 years together. A few years ago we bought our dream house that was a fixer-upper. I spent 2 years working on it and now I won't be living there anymore. She has decided to keep the house for the kids' sake. Her words. I have to admit, I find this to be hurtful and something I struggle with. Knowing that my kids' graduation parties will be there and I will see my wife living out our dreams with her new husband. She doesn't have one now, but I am sure she will by then. But I know that I can't really blame her. It is a practical solution and the only one who would benefit from not keeping the house would be me. But I can get over it. I am sure your wife will too. It is probably just that you've ripped the bandage off of some old wounds and are bringing up a lot of old feelings. Good luck to you both. Just to be clear, I skipped the details of the split for brevity, but the assets and debts were split roughly equally, including the equity. My point was more to the fact that it's tough to move ahead seeing your life plans unfold without you, but you still have to do it. NTA. Your ex is an adult who made her choices. Your lives will always be attached in some ways, perhaps painful ones, and she has to face that. Counseling would probably help her. I'm glad your kids are doing well. You'd be a huge bro if you helped them plan some surprises for their mom to help her feel less forgotten. Enjoy the house. Why is ex-wife an R in your opinion, though? Just wondering. They got divorced. She obviously doesn't want a life with him. That's what you do when you can no longer see yourself being with a person for whatever reason. You divorce them. Holy shit, you all are insane. The kids wanting to stay with him will hurt, but she's seeing the life she could have had. Please, that's just bullshit. Then to the replacer thing, what is someone supposed to do after they divorce? Stay unhappy and single forever? I'm pretty sure she probably found someone or is searching. You're not supposed to be single forever. Marriages often fail because of external pressures that the relationships just can't always survive. Stress overbuilding, money running out, looking after kids, etc. Doesn't mean they were not emotionally invested in their future. It's not always easy to take when things don't work out as you hoped. I'm not saying he should stay single forever, but I can certainly understand her sadness. From her perspective, this is definitely very manipulative and megalomaniacal, but if it was your only option with giving your kid a comfortable place to live and it's your property, man, I can't see why you're the bad guy beyond the fact you're living in the house you made with another woman. I'm assuming the relationship did not end amicably. The relationship wasn't great at the end, but we separated on civil terms and generally we're okay with each other now. NTA. This isn't about the house. Maybe slightly, but not all of it. Your ex is watching you live the life she wanted to have with you. She most likely feels as though you have replaced her with your new wife, which is true and as it should be for you. Now she sees the kids wanting to stay with you and the new wife and is worried the kids are replacing her with your new wife too. I am making some assumptions here, but as a woman I'm betting that on a subconscious level this is what she is thinking. You aren't doing anything wrong and it's not really an issue you can help with. I believe she may need to go to therapy, but do not suggest you tell her that. She needs to hear it from a friend of hers. As I don't know her, I could be wrong and it could be only about the house, but I doubt it. Bingo. I feel bad for your ex reading this. She's gonna be so depressed. I understand it's not your fault, nah, but man, what a thing to live with. I agree, no arseholes here, but my heart breaks for her. I think teenagers should get a say in where they live after a divorce. I don't think they necessarily get to decide. Based on the information here, a 50/50 split sounds fair. I would probably have chosen to live in the bigger, nicer house as a 15-year-old, and honestly, it would have been a mistake. My relationship with my mom would not have been the same.
Baby, walk through, but he know. Ay, walk through with her attitude. Gucci on her neck, I can't be mad at you. Yeah, I just do the shit I feel like I had to do. Visa swipe every time she get mad at you. Yeah, and baby got an attitude. Okay,